Isn't it grand to be a Christian? And isn't it grand and wonderful to be a part of the family here at Concord? I am so excited. I am back with you this morning. My family and I were out of town last week, and we missed you greatly. But we are happy to be back home and happy to be with you. I am very appreciative of Connor for filling in for me on Sunday morning and doing an excellent job talking about the life of Joseph from the pit to the throne, and then also appreciate Jonathan and filling in for me on Sunday night in discussing faith and that mustard seed faith and all different types of faith that we should strive to have. And we are very blessed to have fine young men like those two guys to be able to preach and teach for us, and so I'm very thankful for them. I want to welcome all of our visitors that we have with us. We have several in our number. Some of you are from out of town that are perhaps visiting family. Others are visiting Orlando for the different festivities and things that it has. And some of you are from the community, and we are just so very thankful that each and every one of you are here. And we want you to truly be our honored guests. And so we ask that you would stick around just a little bit afterwards so we can get to know you a little bit better, so you can get to know us a little bit better. If you are looking for a church home this morning, we are so thankful that your search is over and that you have found it, and that you can be a part of our family here at Concord Street. But thank you so much for being a part of our number this morning. We are going to continue in discussing the Gospel of Mark this morning. And remember that our overall theme, if you will, our overall thing that we are thinking about for this entire year, and what we have on the banners beside us here too, is the idea of being cruciformed, to have a life that is shaped by the cross. And what we're doing is we're going through the Gospel of Mark, and as we go through the Gospel of Mark, we are noticing how Jesus' life was one that was shaped by the cross, and how that all of us also as followers are going to be people that are shaped by the cross too, and hopefully changing and cultivating a culture of people that are going to the cross and leading others to that cross too. This morning, let's look in Mark chapter 2. Mark chapter 2, we're going to start in verse 21, and we're actually going to go through verse 39 here in just a moment. Mark chapter 2, starting in verse 21. Mark writes, "Then they went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and taught. And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Now there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, 'Let us alone! What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God.' But Jesus rebuked him, saying, 'Be quiet, and come out of him.' And when the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice, he came out of him. Then they were all amazed, so that they questioned among themselves, saying, 'What is this? What new doctrine is this? For with authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him.' And immediately his fame spread throughout all the region around Galilee. And as soon as they had come out of the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick with a fever, and they told him about her at once. So he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, and she served them. At evening, when the sun had set, they brought to him all who were sick and those who were demon-possessed, and the whole city was gathered together at the door. Then he healed many more who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons, and he did not allow the demons to speak because they knew him. Now in the morning, having risen a long while before daylight, he went out and departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him. And when they found him, they said to him, 'Everyone is looking for you.' But he said to them, 'Let us go into the next towns, that I may preach there also, because for this purpose I have come forth.' And he was preaching in their synagogues throughout all of Galilee and casting out demons." As you think about that verse, think about this question. What was your best day ever? No matter how old you are, wherever you find yourself in life, think back through history. What was your best day? What was the day that at the end of it, that when you laid down in your bed or when you finally got back home or whatever the case was, you just kind of did that was a good day. That was the best day. This is a question I've asked several people over the past week. And maybe when you think about your best day, maybe you think about your wedding day. That is a day that there's lots of planning, there's lots of preparation. There you have the opportunity to establish that covenant with the one you're going to spend the rest of your life with. When I asked Kenny Backus, who preaches up at Orange Avenue, he said that was his best day. He said, I know it sounds cliche, but on that day, I got to go golfing with my friends and enjoy God's beautiful creation. And then I got to marry my bride. That was the best day. When I asked Rodney Cox what his best day was, he said his best day was coming back from war. No longer being at war, to be able to come back home and there to see his family again. Truly, that must have been a best day. When I asked Connor about it, I asked Connor what was his best day. And if you know Connor, then he is a man that strives to have best days all the days, right? But he talked about what his best day was the day that he got engaged to Caden. It was a day that he had planned out meticulously. It's a day that they had been apart. There were several hours apart because she was off in school. He was working as a youth minister in Alabama. And they had all these hours apart, but he had planned this day, and it was a day spent with family, spent with friends, spent with the love of his life, and all the different things they got to do on that day. As we were driving to Freed Hardeman this past week, that's where we were last week for the Freed Hardeman lectures, and as we were driving in the car together as a family, I asked my family, what was their best day? What is your best day ever? And it's interesting to hear what kids say about things, right? Especially because there's so many days that you as parents that you want to try to make their best day, whether it be a birthday or a Christmas or some other thing. My kids, one thing that Carrington mentioned is that one of her best days ever is when I surprised her at school and picked her up on a Thursday at school early, and we drove to Knoxville for the season opener of a Tennessee football game. And I know for many of you, you might think, well, that's not a good day at all. But for me and for her, that was one of our best days. Because especially when I think about myself and I think about all the times I got to go with my father to games. And the excitement that I have and to share some of that excitement with her. And it was interesting that the other boys, Lucas and Lincoln, also mentioned that as being one of the best days. When I think about my best days in life, definitely I think about the days I get to spend with my family. I think about the times that Amber and I, we get to actually take a day, perhaps even away from our family. And that being a best day. Where it's just us, and we can enjoy those things, where we can go out and see something, we can be together. That is a best day. What is so interesting about Mark in chapter 1 here, verses 21 through 29, or through 39, is that Mark is portraying just one day in the life of Jesus. It is interesting that as you go through the text and you look at the different time clues or the clues that are telling us what is going on as far as setting and the time setting, is that Mark portrays this as just one solitary day in the ministry of Jesus. Look what happens in just one day in the ministry of Jesus. We started there in verse 21, and they are in the synagogue. And there in the synagogue, not only does Jesus get to worship and have that opportunity in the synagogue, but he also has the opportunity to teach. It is on that day while they are in the synagogue that there's a man who's a part of their community, a part of the synagogue, who has a demon. And Jesus, right then and there, by His power and His authority, is able to cast out that demon. This all happens on the same day. When they leave there, the people talk about and how that they are amazed. They are amazed at His teaching and astonished at that He can cast out this demon. But it doesn't stop there. That's just the beginning of their day, if you will. As He leaves that place, as they leave the synagogue assembly, He goes with Peter and Andrew and James and John. And there they go into that house in Capernaum, and there He heals Peter's mother-in-law. That's not another day. That's the same day. That happens on the same day. And then the way Mark portrays it is that after all of this is done, that they are gathered at the house and the whole city shows up. The entire town shows up, and what does Jesus spend the rest of the day doing? He heals more and more people. He casts out more demons. He heals more people of more diseases, and so that the entire city is there. And what's amazing is, before the next day even begins, before the sun even comes up, He wakes up early and He goes out and spends time in prayer. And then I love the way Mark portrays this, is that after this time in prayer, after Peter starts looking for him and they find him and they said, hey, everybody in the city is asking about you. They want you to come back. And Jesus makes the point of saying, well, here's what I'm going to do. I need to go out to the other cities and preach. And then Mark proclaims that he goes to other synagogues and casts out other demons, almost to make it that we are starting the day over again. A day that began in the synagogue and began with casting out demons. Now Mark says he's going to other cities to do the same thing. And he is replaying, if you will, this day all over again. That's one day, not an entire ministry. That is one action-filled day. I can imagine the disciples, after this happens, them sitting in that home there in Capernaum, maybe sitting there with Peter's mother-in-law and Peter's wife, and going, whew, that was a good day. That was the best day. I want you to think about this, though. What makes for the best day ever? When I think about something that is about this day in Mark chapter 1, and about what maybe been your best day that you were thinking in your mind, and the best day that when I talked to others that they were talking about, the best day ever is one that is spent in community. How many of you have the best day ever when you are all completely by yourself with no one at all? Now, some of you as moms are going, hey, that sounds like a good day. All right? If I can just go use the restroom by myself, that's a good day, right? But when you think about it, your best day, and something that is a common theme throughout all of these days, it's a day spent with other people. It's a day in community. And Mark portrays this day, this best day, as a day in community also. Notice in Mark in chapter 1 and verse 21, there it says, they. That they is referring back to the disciples that were just called in the earlier passages of Peter, Andrew, James, and John. It is the they, it is those four, and then later others ones are going to be added to, that the entire story starts centering around. It is how they together go through these days. It was a day spent in community. There in the text it says they went into the synagogue. Now, oftentimes we think about synagogue maybe as like we think about church building, like it's a place that they go, but the actual idea of synagogue here is not just a place or a building, but it's talking about groups of people. That's the word really means together. They were together in community. It was after leaving that togetherness that they go together to someone else's house. They go to Simon Peter's house. There again, they are together. And then finally at the end of the evening, that the whole city shows up. A day that is the best day is a day that is spent in community. It's interesting that as we go throughout the text, after this great day, before the next day even dawns, that Mark makes a point to say that he goes to pray in a solitary place. This is the same word that is used early on in Mark to talk about the wilderness. He goes back out into the desert. And so you have that great contrast that he has spent all this time in community, and now he goes to privately commune with his Father. A best day is a day that is spent in community. And think about this. Many times it's not about where you are, but it's about who you're with. Think about all the days that you've had. Have you ever had one of those great days? Not because of the place where you were. It may have been a great place. But what makes it so special is the people that you are with. One thing I want us to encourage all of us about is that if we want to have more best days, then it's going to be because of the community that we keep. One of the great things about this congregation, one of the great things about this family is that it is that community. Remember back a couple months ago or more now, when we talked about what is the church, talking about how it being a community of people. This is the community. These are the ones that we should strive to spend our time with to make our bad days better and our better days best. It's this community that makes for a best day. But also when I think about the best day ever, when you look in Mark chapter 1, not only is it a day spent in community, but it's a day spent in service. Now, I know that may seem counterintuitive, but I want you to think about honestly. Your best days are many times days where you get to serve someone and not when just service is brought towards you. Notice in our text that there is service to God. There they spend that day, that Sabbath day, they spend it in service to God. They're in the synagogue. They're worshiping. They're going through whatever the reading was of the prophets or of the law of that day. There they spent time in service to God. But also on this day, they spent time in service to others. It is Jesus who is serving the community, who is serving all those around in casting out the demons, in healing the various diseases. It was a best day because it was one in service. And then here's my favorite part, and it says it almost as an aside, and if you read it too fast, you're going to miss it. But also we see Peter's mother-in-law. She was healed to serve. You ever notice what it says in the text there? It says Jesus comes up, he grabs her by the hand, or he grabs her, he lifts her up, and suddenly this fever that she had that evidently was about to kill her perhaps, immediately leaves her. And what is the very first thing she does? She serves them. She's a mom. Hello? Right? Oh, she wakes up from this fever. She looks around like, oh, I've got guests. Well, if I got guests, that means I've got refreshments. And so she runs to the kitchen and starts serving them the different things that she wants to prepare for them. But it reminds me is that each and every one of us who have been healed from our sins, if you will, what are we healed to do? We are healed to serve. And that's what she does too. That's what makes for this best day. A day spent in community, a day that is spent in service. But something else I think about when I think about this best day ever, what we see from the text, is a day of astonished and amazed. It's interesting that Mark pulls out these two words in talking about Jesus. First of all, in talking about Jesus' teaching, that they were astonished at His teaching. You see, His teaching was unlike all the other teachers of that time. Other rabbis, other teachers, they would appeal to someone else's authority in order to get their teaching. They would say, well, Rabbi so-and-so says this about the text. And then someone else say, well, Rabbi so-and-so says this. And you could go through and they're always appealing to someone else's authority. No, not Jesus. Jesus doesn't need to appeal to some other rabbi's authority. He appeals to His own authority. He is the one. He is the one that has the authority. And so He preaches, He teaches that one that has that authority, not appealing to some other man, but Him being the man with the authority. But also they are amazed at His power to heal. That Jesus, just with His very words, He doesn't have to do some crazy spell. He doesn't have to have the right things. He doesn't have to have all this other stuff. He can just talk to a demon-possessed man and say, "Come out of him." And guess what that demon's going to do? It can kick and scream all at once, but it's going to come out. It's going to obey the words of the Lord. And the people see this and they are just amazed. If we're going to have the best day ever, we too need to be people that are astonished, that are amazed. The best days are the days that we are astonished, maybe by God's creation, maybe by God's individuals they put into us, or maybe by God Himself. Being astonished and amazed is what makes that best day. So, when you think about your best day ever, the final thing I want you to think about is what really makes for the best day is not only time spent in community, is not only time spent in service, is not only time being astonished and amazed, but the best day ever that you can ever imagine, the best day, is a day spent with Jesus. That's the day. Think back to your good days. It is about the one that you are with that makes it so great. There perhaps has been times in your life, like in my life, where we have been at something and maybe it's something that's not even that great. Maybe there's difficulties that are there. Maybe there's hardships that are involved with that day. And that any other outsider looking in may look at that day and say, well, that must have been a really, really bad day. But what makes it a great day is I got to spend it with the one I love. That makes for that great day. And the same thing is true when we think about your best days. Your best days that are still to come are going to be days where your day is spent with Jesus. You can spend that day with Jesus in community. When we think about us coming together on the Lord's Day, us coming together to worship, and there may be many, many reasons why you are here this morning. It may be because your parents drug you here. It may be because your spouse wanted you to be here and you don't want to hear them complain about you not being here. Maybe you are here because there's someone that you want to see. Maybe you are here because you want to worship. Maybe you are here for various different reasons. But I want you to know that when you are here, you are in community with Jesus. It is so beautiful in how the New Testament brings out different things. Over in Hebrews and in chapter 2, there talks about how that the Lord is not ashamed to sing in the assembly with the brethren. So when I have opportunity in the assembly, in this community, to sing praises, I have next to me on that pew the Lord singing with me. And He's not ashamed to be called my brother because He died for me. When we think about coming together and taking of the Lord's Supper, and what a great job Jermaine did in leading our thoughts just a few moments ago, but when we are there and taking of that Lord's Supper, how many tables are there? There's one table. There is one body. There is one blood. There is one Lord that we are all together with in community, remembering His sacrifice. The best day with Jesus is a day that is spent in community. But also the best day with Jesus is a day that is spent in service. If you're having a bad day, if you're having a rough day about things and the world is just really beating you down, one of the best things you can do to improve your day is to get out of yourself and thinking about you and look out to others. And be of service to them. And realize that your service to them is not you trying to pat yourself on the back. It's not you trying to uplift yourself. But instead, your service to them is to glorify God, is to show Jesus. Just like the expression says, people won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. One of the best things you can do for Christianity is to show the compassion of Christ in your life. And you do that in service to others. One of the great things that we have a part of this congregation is that there is many, many opportunities to be about the service of the Lord. If you are not involved with one of the many ministries that are going on, then please get involved. If you have questions about that, then please see myself or Dan or one of our elders here, and we will get you involved, because that will lead to a better day. Because the best day is a day spent with Jesus in service. But also a best day with Jesus is spent with Jesus in astonishment. I love being able to worship with each and every one of you. One of the things I love about Concord is the singing. And not only is the singing beautiful, but when we have those beautiful tones, we really get to focus also in on those words of those songs. When I have the opportunity to gather around the table with you and to consider the Lord's death and sacrifice, when I think about how that us together in this community, when we sing those songs and think about service to God, and how that as what we are looking forward to in eternity is be able to spend an eternity in service to God. When I think about all of those things and I think about a day spent with Jesus, I am just astonished. I'm astonished that Jesus, the same Jesus that would spend His day casting out demons, the same Jesus that would have the entire city lined out His door to have all of those healings, the same Jesus that taught with this authority, the same Jesus that was the very Son of God, I'm astonished that He would love me. I don't deserve that day. You see, because even on my best day is a day that I have not always put Him first. Even on my best day is a day where I must acknowledge the sinfulness of my human being. Even on my best day, with my best thinking, with my best service, with my best stuff that I can possibly bring, is still not going to be good enough for me to go to heaven. But His best day makes for my best day. Because I can sit there and at the foot of the cross, that's what we're trying to do. Each and every time that we come together, what we want to do is we want to lead ourselves to the foot of the cross and to sit there and to look up that cross and to be astonished and realize that was for me. And then once you get to the foot of the cross, you can never leave the same again. And if you do, then you're doing it wrong. But instead, you leave no longer coming alone. But when you get to the cross, you leave with the Lord. And so you can spend a day in community with Him, in service with Him, and always just being astonished. What a good day. This morning, I want you to have the best day ever. I cannot think of any better day than the day that you decide to put on Christ in baptism. Because that's what you're doing. So in a spiritual way, what you are doing is you can't get to that cross that is over in the Middle East. You can't get to that hill called Calvary in a physical way. But in a very real way, you can go to the foot of the cross this morning. And you can say, I no longer want to live the life that I want to live, but I want to live the life that you want me to live. We have a name for that. It's called repentance. You can get to that foot of the cross and you can realize that the man hanging on that cross is not just Jesus as a man, but He is both Lord and Christ. He is the King and He is the Messiah. And when you get to that cross, you can believe that He is that. We call that belief or faith. And then you can stand there at the foot of the cross and you can look at that man, Jesus, who loves you so much, and you can profess to everyone here that I know that He is both Lord and Christ. And then just as He is dead on that cross, we take our old man of sin and we crucify ourselves with Him. And then just as Jesus was taken down from that cross and was put into a tomb, we go with Christ into the watery grave of baptism so that we can, with Christ, rise to walk in newness of life. And I will promise you this, that's the best day. That's the best day of all the days. Looking forward to the eternal day that is that best day. But for many more of you that you are already Christians, but I realize this because I'm a Christian too. Just because I'm a Christian doesn't mean that I don't struggle with things. And just because I'm a Christian doesn't mean that when I'm here at church that everything is just perfect in my life, because we realize that that's not the case either. And there may be things in your life that are amiss. There may be something that in your life that is making your best of days even worse. I can promise you this. If you are carrying around in your life unrepentant sins, if you are carrying around in your life where you are trying to walk your days partly in the world and partly with Christ, you will never experience the best day that Jesus has for you. But instead, let us also, those of us that are Christians, be willing to submit ourselves to Him, to surrender, to lay down our fighting for what we think is best, and allow Jesus to have His way with us also. And so each and every one of us, we may have come into this place one way, but let every single one of us leave totally different, because our best day is a day with Christ. It's so interesting how Mark, it's almost subtle that he portrays all this just as one solitary day. If that one day with Mark, in Mark's gospel, is a great day, imagine how many best days you can have with Jesus also. I don't know where you are on your faith walk. I don't know necessarily the things that you are struggling with. But there's probably some here who need to put on Christ in baptism, and there's many more of us that need to recommit our life to those best days. If there's anyone who can help you this morning, please come as we stand and sing.